This is Natasha D'Souza reporting for SALT Voices, and I'm here at the inaugural SALT Abu Dhabi with Dr. Tariq bin Hindi, the newly appointed Director General of the Abu Dhabi Investment Office. Thank you for speaking with us, Tariq.
Thank you for having me.
Good to have you here.
Thank you.
Now, here, of course, everybody's, there's this huge buzz about SALT now being hosted in Abu Dhabi. It's its first time here in the city. Take us through why you think, Abu Dhabi was the right choice for a forum like SALT.
Well, I mean, first of all, Abu Dhabi is at the forefront of trying to connect the world, and now we're connecting the world through Abu Dhabi. SALT is very prominent. They have events around the world, especially in Las Vegas. There'll be a big keynote event that they have, and so bringing it to Abu Dhabi is actually quite an accomplishment in terms of being able to host people in the region that have never been to the region, and people that are very familiar with the region, to show them what it is that we're doing and how it is that we're growing and evolving as a city and as a country.
Okay, so SALT is like a lens now that completely new people and audiences can use to understand Abu Dhabi and the region.
It is. I've interacted with a few people at the event today that have never been here, and we're actually quite surprised at how advanced and progressed it is. And I think these are that soft initiatives that we have in terms of getting the world to better understand what it is that we're trying to do.
Okay. Help us better understand what it is the Abu Dhabi Investment Office is doing, especially now in your new capacity. I think, what is the vision that you've kind of laid out for the office, perhaps in the next, say, 2 to 3 years?
It's a great question, because I think we've got quite a wide mandate. We look at everything from public-private partnerships to the SME space to tech investments, and to really leveling the playing field for the private sector in Abu Dhabi. And I think what we've done is we've looked at this from an approach of, okay, we've got an FDI element, but we've also got a DDI element. So there's the domestic development as well as the foreign direct investments into Abu Dhabi. And what we've noticed is that actually we've got a very, very attractive proposition for people that are both already here in the region or in the country, as well as people that are looking to move into Abu Dhabi. And it cuts across many different sectors, segments, opportunities, and so on. So ourselves as the Abu Dhabi Investment Office, our mandate is whilst it's broad, it's very refined in that we're trying to address the private sector requirements, right, in terms of funding, either hard dollars, soft dollars, and what I mean by that is we can be an investor, or we can offer rebates and subsidies depending on what it is that you're trying to set up in Abu Dhabi. So we're welcoming the world here. We're looking at every different type of company from any country, different sectors, and how it is that we can help host them in Abu Dhabi and find a home for them in the region.
Now, you mentioned SMEs just now, and what I wanted to, and we've discussed this over the course of the day here, as part of SALT Voices, the fact that here in the UAE, only 3.5% of conventional financing is being tapped into by SMEs or is being made available to them. And 65% of them literally have little to no access to financing. So it's a very starved space. Where might ADIO, or is ADIO looking at that and I think doing anything on the ground to kind of service this starved segment of the ecosystem?
It's a great observation. It's also a great question. And I think this is something that much of the leadership has recognized. And part of the reason why that mandate sits with ADIO is that we're trying to address that. So we have various programs. We're looking at ways that we can bring the banks into the conversation with the SMEs. We're looking at ways that we can provide that financing to the SMEs, perhaps in a different manner, right? Perhaps it's not conventional lending. Perhaps they're looking to raise capital to be able to build their firm. Rather than borrow from a financial institution, we'll look to invest. We'll look to bring other segments of the private sector into that firm to help them expand. But that's just for the growth of a business. We're actually looking at, okay, now how do we help these businesses commercialize their ideas? How do we help them expand? How do we take them from an SME, right, depending on the structure, to a much bigger entity, right? And what are the different things that we need to do along the way to help them that? And that includes
both from SME to high growth venture.
Yeah, to that mid-size company that that has the potential to grow up. Think of them as like a national champion, for example, right? Various countries around the world have these different programs. Singapore's identified the top 100 companies. New Zealand's done the top 200 companies. So we're looking at ways that we can help those firms that have high potential grow, but we're also looking at the average sort of mom and pop shop that is looking at how it is that they can stay relevant, they can expand, and what policies and regulations need to be adjusted to help them remain resilient and participate in Abu Dhabi's economy over the long term.
Okay. Now, a number of parties that I've spoken to here today talk about, the appetite that they're sensing that Abu Dhabi has, investors have in general, towards different classes of technology businesses. And I'd love to know, at ADIO, what do you in particular or your team have their eyes on within the tech space as an investment proposition?
So the interesting thing about tech and innovation is that it's constantly evolving. Just like the city and our ambitions and where it is that we're trying to get to, I think that if you look at the programs that we have designed today, you have very, very interesting programs around ag tech, around ed tech, but more importantly, we're receiving feedback from the market about the different programs that they're interested in, the different programs that we can potentially launch. So it's as much as us giving a message out as it is receiving feedback from the community.
So there's this osmosis between
there's
both sides.
There's a very symbiotic relationship between the people on the ground that are actually running businesses or looking to set up businesses and what it is that we can offer. A good example of that is if you look at fintech, right? Today, fintech is hyped everywhere. You hear lots of different countries and cities trying to address fintech. For us, we've thought about this very simplistically. You have one of the largest banks in the region in Abu Dhabi. You've got the central bank, you've got the regulators, they're all based here in Abu Dhabi. How can we help these firms come in, set up, not only to disrupt, right? Because ultimately it's the consumer that you're trying to help, right? How do you disrupt? How do you enhance? How do you make things more efficient? And how do you plug them into the existing infrastructure and ecosystem? So that's our role essentially, right? You've got these core industries. How do I build an ecosystem around that? And how do I make that ecosystem resilient, right? And so I think it's an interesting job that we've got over the next few years.
Right.
I call it a job, but really it's a privilege. What we are doing is we are trying to make sure that the private sector is set for the long term, and we will offer many different types of incentives to make sure that that is accomplished.
When you talk about bringing the banks on board, do you sense any palpable shift, not just in mindset, but actually in follow through and actions where we're enabling a new class of financial technology companies to actually conduct transactions?
I do.
Literally the power that banks today have to enable transactions, allowing regulated, licensed fintech companies be able to do the same?
I do. I think I'm an ex-banker, right? And so I've spent many years in the banking industry. I've seen where the old ways are being disrupted, and you can either do it proactively or you can do it reactively.
Okay.
And the banks that wait for it to do it reactively are not going to fare as well as the banks that are doing it proactively. So there are banks already in the country. FAB has many leading initiatives in terms of what it is that they're trying to, and they're inviting these firms in. Because better to know what the disruptors are doing today so that you can incorporate it into your strategy and your vision going forward as an institution. But then when the banks start being disrupted and they're looking at different mechanisms and things that it is that they can enhance for the consumer, that feeds into the wider ecosystem in terms of what we're trying to accomplish, right? So there's this feeding effect effectively in terms of what happens. And I think that is, it's a really healthy model for the banks to follow. I think the fintech firms that are coming in, there have been some announcements recently about new or legacy fintech firms out of the US and Europe moving to Abu Dhabi, and how it is that that's disrupting certain areas of the banking sector, but it's going to happen. And so you can
It'll be great to see something homegrown happening too, because those parties also exist.
It will. Yeah. And that's our ambition. We want to welcome the world here, but we also have a very robust ecosystem here already. We're trying to create a knowledge economy. We want to be able to export knowledge as well as import it, and we want it to stay here. And so we've got fantastic homegrown firms. We're looking to help them just as much, if not more, than international firms that are looking to set up here, and really level that playing field for everyone. So they call Abu Dhabi home for the long term.
Okay, and this week SALT calls Abu Dhabi its home. So it's been great speaking with you. Thank you so much for the insights you've shared with us, and I'm happy we got to talk to you today.
Thank you. Same here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good one.